Hangouts on air is
Hung,
live. Hangouts.
hung hots.
We need
Sounds like
some
a Star Wars character.
intro music to just be playing when it goes live, so it looks like we're gently transitioning into this instead of just like, oh, bam, there it goes.
I'm not gonna do that.
That would require
that sounds like
forethought and planning.
Yeah, it seems like you need audio tech to do that, and fuck that.
I think we can just play an MP3, show off some collab tunes.
Yeah, but if I didn't care enough to promote that when we have stuff to promote, why would I do
it? True.
That's not true. Actually, you all should go check out the new album, the not new album that came out like a month or two ago. At allthatcollab.bandcamp.com. It's free album for you. It's a free album. Take it.
What if I want to pay for it?
You can. That's an option too. It's pay what you want. And if that's 0, you can type in 0.
We'd be good at these like late night infomercials. But wait.
But wait, you can pay money.
Can it also get stains off my carpeting?
Probably. I don't know. Rub that shit in water. Fucking just yeah. Sure. Whatever.
So you bought a game, I noticed on Twitter, that kind of surprised me, but it doesn't sound like your experiences with it have been very good so far.
I've bought a couple of games since we last did the show. So the first one I started, it was my brother's birthday last week. So that was part of the reason why we couldn't. Yeah, so I buy myself shit and I rub it in his face.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of the reason why we didn't have a show last week. It's because we couldn't do a makeup day and I had to work Wednesday. And one of the games he bought, he got like an Amazon card from a friend of ours, and he used that to pick up Axiom Verge. And Axiom Verge was a game that I was really interested in when it came out because it's that 2D exploration genre that I love. And
Metroidvania, everybody's favorite.
Yeah, right. And it's so weird how upset people get about that term, even though it's
it's a very concise way to describe a type of game.
Yeah, you immediately know what we're talking about. Well, it's more than just Metroid, man, and Castlevania. Well, duh, but it works. Everyone understands what you're saying when you talk about it. So and I love that genre, and everything about Axiom Verge looked pretty good. But when it came out, everyone was saying, "Oh, it's not just good. This is fantastic. It's not inspired by. It's informed by Metroid." I kept reading shit like that, and it's like,
well, you got to sound like very fancy when you're talking video games.
Well, they're trying to put it on this higher standard that after playing through it, I don't quite agree that it's a good Metroid type of game, but it's not. I don't think they fucking reinvented the wheel or anything. Part of the problem I think is that everything that everybody told me Axiom Verge does that's so revolutionary is, to me, it's just different means to the same ends we've already done before. You create platforms with this type of gun, and you open up different doors with this type of gun. Not really doors, but barriers. And probably the worst thing I think I can say about Axiom Verge is that it's not fun to actually navigate through, which is a big hit against a game that's all about navigating.
Right. I was going to say that's kind of an important part to that genre.
And it's not like it's bad. There's nothing in the controls where it's like, oh, this is fucked up or anything. It's just really slow and stiff, and it's very bare bones. Jump. like, and you don't ever get really like a dash or anything, and it's kind of like I'm kind of spoiled by the games that have evolved on this genre already, because it's gotten to the point now where those types of games you're literally flying all over the place. And so to play a game where you're just jumping everywhere, it's really like it feels really tedious and slow.
That's why every time we talk about this genre now, I go back and say how I really wish you could play Ori and the Blind Forest.
Right.
I know you watched it and you're very informed about it, but I think you would love it. And it
I do
does
too.
have that very fast, free-moving. It's a modern Metroidvania type game,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful. It's still got to be up there for one of my Game of the Year nominations, even though the asshole game broke my controller, and now they're coming out with more content for it. They're going after my surviving controller, but it's good.
Yeah. So, as annoying as like Axiom Verge is, it's hard as shit. That was probably why it felt so tedious to get around, is because you die a lot, and then you get knocked back to the last save point you checked in at, and then you gotta like navigate all these rooms, and there's no quick way to just like skip through enemies and shit. And that's, I felt like that was something even Super Metroid kind of got down really quickly, was that you can skip because
I'm going to flip over to you because you're breaking up, so that's a good time to put you up on the big screen. There it goes. I never played Super Metroid. Like, I played a little of the original NES Metroid, never like all the way through it or anything.
Super Metroid is brilliant. It's probably my favorite Super Nintendo game, and that's a hell of a system to make that claim on, but it's fucking brilliant.
And then it was all downhill from there.
This is really strange. My internet's saying I'm not connected, but then it says I'm connected.
You're definitely somewhat connected. You're not as connected as you were 5 minutes ago, but you're somewhat connected. You're half connected.
And now my shit's resetting, and this is a mess. This whole live show thing was a bad idea.
It was a terrible idea because we could barely get down the recorded show without.
Yeah, we couldn't keep a Skype call working. Now we have to fucking try to maintain a constant connection through this bullshit. But
we're brave. We forged on ahead with technology regardless.
Right. So in Axiom Verge, I think the closest I came to like this, to the point of just like, this shit full blown sucks, which it doesn't, but I was really mad at the time. There was this fucking boss, and up to this point, the bosses in the game I thought had actually been pretty cool. Like, they kind of reminded me of like Contra bosses, where you pump them full of bullets, and they're all squishy and shit, and it's fun to shoot them. And then I got to this fucking boss that is just a wasp, and it's just a giant wasp, and it can only get hurt if you shoot it in the mouth, and then it like shoots little wasps at you, and they fucking take forever to die. And it is one of the worst boss fights I've ever played for how difficult it is and how fucking boring it is. Because it's like there's no like trick to the pattern. It's just like, oh, they didn't drop any health for you this time, so you're fucked, and you got to do it again, and hope they drop health next time you shoot the little bees. And yeah, and then it never really kind of recovered from that. The boss fights all afterwards seemed really stupid, where it's just like little things will annoy you while you shoot the big glowing weak point, and after a while the formula ran kind of thin. So I don't know. It's a good game, but it's one of those games. It's like the definition of, if people had just shut the fuck up about it, I probably would have liked it more.
Yeah,
like for what
you go into it expecting it to be like the best game in that genre. That's
seriously, I can't tell you how many people said, "Oh, that's my game of the year."
I remember that because I almost jumped on it because it's on Steam as well, I believe. And people were talking it up so much, I wanted to play it too.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good game. It's not fucking outstanding. I have no idea like how bereft people have been for like 2D platformer content, but there are plenty of games like that out there. You just have to look for them. Axiom Verge didn't fucking bring that back, but whatever, to each their own, I guess. But I thought it was just okay, and I probably would have been more excited about it afterwards had like nobody built it up to be this goddamn revolutionary thing that I don't think it was ever meant to be. Also, the writing in it is terrible. It is one of the like it has this really like dramatic story that seems out of touch with how like cartoony like a lot of the artwork and stuff seems to be. Like I don't know, you can definitely tell it was kind of one guy's project. and like good on him. It's a good project for one person to develop that, but like I feel like we're kind of spoiled in the indie scene with developers doing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got to keep in mind Dust and Elysian Tale or Legend, however that's said. That was one guy. I mean, he had some help on the music and stuff, but it was basically one guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody gets some help somewhere. Like nothing. There's not too many video games that are like completely created in a vacuum. But one guy's vision, one guy's late night work and shit and coding and.
I didn't realize until today that the it's often controversial developer Jonathan Blow is working on The Witness, and to me that game I couldn't be less interested in it, and not anything because of him. I don't have any strong opinions one way or the other about him, although I know he tends to draw them. But I didn't realize that there's like he's like the one directing that. It's like his vision and he's directing the project, but there's like a different team that's actually making it, and I assume most studios kind of operate that way. But I had been under the impression that his project was another one that was similar like that, where he was doing most of the work, and I knew there was other people. It wasn't like a solo thing.
Right.
But clearly that's not how the structure behind that game goes.
Well, The Witness is a weird one because there's still so little we understand about what that game is. And they keep saying like, oh well, it's coming out soon. Well, it's like, well, what is it? Yeah. Like before you release it, what?
It's probably unfair on my part, but I kind of get the feeling it's going to be one of these games that's way more pretentious than it deserves to be.
I don't even know. I don't even know if I would agree with that, because if there's one thing I'll give Jonathan Blow based off of Braid is that he knows how to design a puzzle. And all I know about The Witness is that it's an island full of puzzles. So at least it would be like
a Myst or something, or a Seventh Guest if you played those games, except for not FMV, open world puzzle game. But that's the impression I get.
Like I could kind of see it on that level, but I think I wouldn't even call doing something like that really pretentious in this day and age where it's like, we got games like Everybody's Gone to Rapture or whatever the hell that's called. And it's like, we have games where you literally just walk around and like read people's notes, know? So it's like, and I'm not even saying that in a way of like, oh, those aren't real games. Like we have plenty of room for shit like that. Maybe I don't want to play them, but we have plenty of room in the world for people to do that. But that seems way more pretentious to me than somebody being like, hey, here's an island of puzzles and solve the puzzles. It's like, I don't know.
Rapture was pretty funny this week with the reviews coming out, and one of the big knocks on the game was that it was like really beautiful, and a lot of people, if you like exploring an empty world, that's all it is storytelling through the environment. But was that how long it took to travel through the world, especially given all the backtracking. And then it came out after the reviews hit and knocked it for that there is a sprint key. And
Yeah.
And it's funny because it was just hilarious to watch because it was just a surreal, weird situation. I can't remember another game ever coming out and then getting like dinged for not having a feature that it does actually have, and nobody could find it. On the flip side, it's still like a lot of people are saying, well, I hope these reviewers go back and correct their scores if they took off the score. I'm like, well, but doesn't it deserve then to lose some points for having a feature that nobody organically found?
Yeah.
Like they explained, it was a whole just weird situation that led up to it, to where the mechanic got changed at the last minute, and then the help screen that shows what the buttons do, they didn't have time to update that. And
that seems kind of fucking lazy to me. Like, you couldn't even like have like a quick graphic of like, hey, hold that button down.
That's how it's, that's what I would think. But they talked about how that screen that does that is this whole like flash system, and they said if we had done that, we'd had to put it through Q&A, and we don't have to make sure. I don't know. I would think you just update like a JPEG of your controller layout, but
I would just put that shit in the description when you buy the game.
Like, yeah, well, that's what they kind of said. The developer kind of apologized. They're like, we didn't handle this well. We should have at least like made an announcement that it's there, because it's not a intuitive system. You have to hold a button down, and then it slowly ramps up to a sprint. And apparently the button that they use for that has other uses in the game too. So like, I don't fault anybody for not finding it on their own.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a dumb way to have like a move faster button, because that's not really how people move anyway. It's like, if I go into a jog, then I go into the jog immediately, and there should be a noticeable increase in speed. Maybe it takes me a while to build up to a sprint, but
even then, when you're talking about, if I'm going from a walk to a sprint, I ramp, I'm not instantly sprinting, but it's not a long ramp up either. I mean, you could go from a walk to a full out.
Like if
you're strictly speaking like your exact top sprint speed, but I mean, you can go from a walk to a run in a matter of.
Oh, you mean in real life? I'm talking about how they did it in the game.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I mean, real life, you ramp up. I'm not instantly. My velocity doesn't change from walk to run in an instant, but it's close enough to where I've never played it. Well, I guess that's not true. If you literally jump from walk to sprint the second you push the sprint button, that would be a little jarring, but the ramp up for a sprint should be extremely short.
Yeah, part of me wonders, because I watched the Giant Bomb Quick Look for it, and one thing they kind of noticed is as they're playing the game, shadows were kind of glitching a little bit and stuff, and really minor stuff. The game looks incredible, but they saw like little things like that, and I wonder how much of that had to do with the movement speed.
Well,
like how much they could render, and like how fast the character was able to go in order to render it.
Well, and it wasn't like they added sprint at the last second. And the way that it was originally in the game sounds a lot cooler to me, in that the way it worked all the way up until like a week before launch was you would just walk in any direction, and the longer you were walking in that direction, your speed would ramp up. Like, you wouldn't have to press anything to sprint. It's just if you're walking across the field for a while, you're going to slowly pick up speed. And I kind of like that idea because it's different. But they said the feedback when they play tested it was that people wanted that input of pushing a button. Otherwise it felt, weird to them. And I understand that, because people are weird sometimes, like the things that shouldn't make a difference do. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the shadows and stuff were because the way all that was laid out was based on, there would only be certain areas where you physically could get up to a sprint because you'd have to be moving in a certain direction. And now you can sprint whenever you want by holding the button. So they talked about that. They said then they had to play test, make sure you couldn't now run to a place where you weren't supposed to be able to, and end up like, jumping over an object you weren't supposed to, and getting stuck, that kind of thing. So it was a weird situation there. It's like one of those things where you'd think, though, if it was something that arose out of playtesting, that would have arose before, a week or two before launch. Like, if it was really that big of a problem with playtesters, wouldn't that be one of the first things that they?
Yeah, it's probably something they were really probably conflicted about. Like,
well, and they did say that I guess it was like Sony Santa Monica who published it that really kind of urged them to change the mechanic, and not that they're passing the buck or anything, but it was probably that. But I was happy to see that overall the reviews for the game have been mostly positive. I mean, there's been some people that said it's just kind of boring, but
I've heard a lot of people, oddly enough, a lot of people who loved Gone Home saying that like it's kind of, you know, it's just not interesting. Like it's not a good payoff to that story. Which is my whole point about Gone Home, but whatever. Once again, to each their own. I had other things to play. Even though honestly, everybody's gone to Rapture just made me want to buy The Vanishing of Ethan Carter.
Yeah, a little bit. And somebody had said the reverse of that. They were talking to I forget who now, but a writer for some site that reviewed Rapture for them, and they said, "Well, I loved Ethan Carter. Would I like Gone Home?" They said, "Well, maybe, or not Gone Home, Rapture." They said, "Well, maybe it says Rapture's like Ethan Carter, but with less agency, so like less direct story like Ethan Carter has." I loved it. I streamed most of my playthrough of Ethan Carter because that was right about the time I think that was like the first game I played when I got my new PC. And I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Yeah. In fact, I actually played some of it on my old laptop because that's what's amazing to me about that game is as gorgeous as Ethan Carter is, the technology that they developed to make it run like. Obviously, I had it on the lowest graphic settings on my laptop, but it ran fine. It wasn't even like I'm getting 2 frames a second deal. Like you could scale it way down and it would still work. But it was much more impressive to play once I got could scale it on the opposite end all the way up. But it's a gorgeous game and it was a cool game. It's one of those, I thought the ending of the game didn't pay off as much as I was hoping it would. And that kind of transitions into the one. I'll jump ahead of you real quick into what I've been playing. Cradle. I've been talking a lot about it on Twitter. And it's another one of those kind of open world. It's more directly related to like Ethan Carter or the old Myst 11th Hour, 7th Guest. It's free roam, but it's that kind of pick up the stick to go knock the object out of the tree, take that object to the night, kind of object-based puzzle game. And I finished that last week while we were, taking our break from the show. And it got to the end, and the story was kind of corny, but kind of neat. It was Eastern European inspired, well, not inspired because that's where they're from, but that style of sci-fi. And then it got really weird. And then it got to the end. The end surprised me because it kind of comes up on you really fast. And I'm kind of an idiot anyway. I didn't understand what they were going for with the ending at all. It just ended and I was sitting there like, what? So
then it got weird, and then I didn't care, and then it got weirder.
Yeah.
Well, that seems to be the arc.
Yeah. And like the ending, I could tell it was supposed to be this like big, deep, meaningful ending. And I missed the connection somewhere. Maybe I'll have to replay it. And because it could have been a line of dialogue I missed while I was streaming. I might have talked over something, but they got to the end. I sort of got what they were going for, but it didn't resonate at all. It wasn't like it was bad. It's just there was definitely some severed connection there where I was just like, oh, okay. So
that's a good feeling to walk away from a game from. Like just all right.
It was also a little disappointing. I liked the story. I loved the world that they create, just both visually and like the atmospherically and the characters. You're not alone in the world. You're almost alone, but there's a couple other characters in there. And they were really well done. The story was the writing wasn't the greatest, but it was interesting. But half of the game were these like action-oriented mini games, and they were all very similar. Like the rules would change slightly, but it was based on like cubes, and it's hard to describe. I'm not going to go into it here on the podcast, but it wasn't fun was the problem. And what was really nice was if you failed the mini game, they gave you the option to like basically act like you completed it and continue on with the story. But at the same time, I appreciated not having to redo these mini games that I hated. But that's also kind of admitting like these aren't fun. We know you probably won't want to redo this. But they don't give you an option to just skip them all together. Like, we're gonna make you suffer through it once, but we'll let you like skip it if you fail. And
you know,
so that
Hand of Fate had that feature. I probably would have liked that game more.
You failed the battle. Do you want to continue anyway? Yes.
Yeah. Just get me to the credits, or in that game's case, get me to the fucking game-breaking crash that will corrupt all your data and fuck you.
That's what I thought the final nail. I was trying to remember because it's been so many moons ago. But I knew the game. I knew you didn't like the game to begin with, but I thought it had some pretty crippling technical issues too.
Oh yeah, I couldn't recommend that game on any level, really. But and so I didn't.
Yeah.
check out the site for my recommendation, my glowing recommendation of that game that I feel terrible about because they sent it to us for free and they're small developer, but
it happens.
That's how it goes. Yeah. Speaking of small developers, CD Projekt Red.
Yeah, they're tiny.
They're tiny. Nobody's heard of them. And poor them. I'm going to give them a handy little shout out on this show today, and hopefully they'll get their name spread worldwide.
They might gain a fan or two.
They made a little game called The Witcher 3. You've played it?
Yes.
I don't know if you've beaten it. You might have quit.
I haven't quit, but I've just been so busy with other stuff.
So
when you're like 60 hours into a game and not even near the end, sometimes you have to put it on pause. Otherwise, everything else gets ignored.
You and me have been doing this for a while, and in the time I've known you, I've never seen you like go back and
I
finish
still
up
play
a
it.
game.
I played it once or twice a week. It's just I don't play it every night like I was.
Okay. If you're still playing it weekly, I guess that's all right. But so one of the games I got my brother for his birthday, aka for me for his birthday, was Witcher 3. And I was kind of for a while out there, I thought I should probably play that when I get a PC. Because I am interested in The Witcher, but it's always been kind of, well, you can get a console version, but this is a PC game at its core and stuff, and that's all I've ever heard about it. But the PS4 version was $10 off on Amazon the day I bought it, so, money talks. And so I picked it up, and I had the Monday, and I had it all installed. I pre-installed it, all the update data, and I go to put it in, and I'll be like, this will be cool. I can just spend my day playing an RPG, and that'll be great.
Yeah, no.
It didn't fucking happen. Like, every time I tried to start that game up, the intro cutscene would play through, both intro cutscenes, the fucking artsy comic book style thing, and then like the CG cutscene. I would have to watch them both, and then the game would freeze on the loading screen after that. and I watched that fucking from that night to the next day. I watched those two intro cutscenes, and they're long. Like, they're long fucking cutscenes, and you can't skip them. Like, until you've gotten through them once, you're not allowed to skip them. Until I figured out what was going on with my update data. But up until that point, it's like I watched that fucking cutscene for the game to freeze on the loading screen 10 times. And that's a lot of fucking hours while I'm waiting for the update to fucking fully download again, because I had to delete all the install data, all the patch stuff, and re-download and reinstall all that crap multiple times. And on the last time I tried to do it, I had a box out ready for I'm gonna return this piece of shit because it's broken. I can't. Everything I look up online, nobody can help me. I've done everything they told me to do. The fucking game is just a technical train wreck if I can't play it. Maybe the disc is fucked up, but it looked okay. every time I looked at it. But it was one of those Amazon deals where you open it up and the disc was unhinged.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's just like, oh, that's great. Wherever this came from, it's been just rolling around in there. Awesome. But it looked okay. And I'm like, okay, I reinstalled the update data. I've reinstalled the game. This is my last fucking shot. If it doesn't work, I'm done with this. Throwing it in a box, getting rid of it. And it fucking worked. And it's one of those things, like the same fucking thing trying to do the show today. Like, I did nothing different. I just did it.
Yeah.
I just did it one more time, and it fucking worked.
I think you scared it. The disc knew
Yeah.
that you were getting ready to send it back, and it's like, no, I was just messing, Ben.
It's like if you get a dog and he's a real pain in the ass, and then like he starts fucking whimpering and snuggling up to you the moment you're like you're going away.
Yeah.
So I've been playing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask if you had, because I saw your tweets about it. I knew you were having problems with getting it to run, but I didn't pay attention to the timestamp, so I didn't know if you'd had.
I've only played a couple hours now, so like those tweets are all I've really said about it, and that's just me in the thick of like fucking technical issues and troubleshooting fucking support threads online and just no one being helpful. So I use some rather harsh language talking about The Witcher. But now that I'm playing it, that game seems almost perfect for me. Like I was surprised how much I like how the combat is set up. Like it's like the way Geralt moves is very kind of arcadey, but the actual action is very deliberate, and you have to be really smart about like what you're doing at any given time.
And it's interesting hearing you talk, because this is the first Witcher game you've played, right? You didn't play 2.
Yeah.
And it's not real intuitive in that it's the only game I can think of that really does it like The Witcher does it. And you had described it perfectly, because especially in 3, I mean, it's iterated over the series. 1 is a lot more clunky and deliberate, and 1 never came to console, so it's specifically designed for keyboard and mouse. Then 2 introduced the gamepad, and 3 kind of it made it, refined it. But it feels very it's fast and responsive like an arcade game, but it almost has the cadence and requirements of something like Dark Souls. I mean, you really have to pay attention when to dodge, when to sidestep, when to lunge in for your attacks.
Yeah.
And I think that's what threw a lot of people off, is if you go into it and it feels arcadey and you try to play it arcadey, just slash, you're not
fucked.
going to get, it doesn't work. And
that
it's funny because it seems like you took to it quicker than I did, and I played all 3 of the games, but when I first started Witcher 3, I almost had this like disappointment, like, man, this feels almost sloppy and broken, and then something finally clicks and you're like, oh, I'm just completely approaching this wrong.
I think part of it is like I like how controlling him feels in that world. Like even when you're not fighting, just moving around the villages and stuff, it all feels very natural, and it kind of feels like it feels like kind of what I wanted Fable to be on some level, where it's just like I can look over there, and if I want to, I can head in that direction. But
now there might be a griffin up there that's going to rip my head off. Yeah.
Right. But I like knowing that I can, while Fable sort of feels like you're really limited. Even later games where it's like they tried to emphasize like you can get off the path, you can't really get off the path. The path is just wider, like there's some trees and shit. But so I kind of like that aspect of it, and I think my time with games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne have really, like, they've added a level of I don't even know if it's patience or just appreciation for games where it's like if I want to just mash buttons and fucking ruin enemy shit, like I have Devil May Cry, I have all these other action games that do that. It's the more deliberate games where it's like I have to think about not just what I'm doing, which is the Devil May Cry sort of style. I have to think more about what the enemy's doing, and each one is satisfying in different ways. But I think my time with Dark Souls and Bloodborne really helped me out preparing for the actual combat of The Witcher, because like that's that's questions countering, looking for openings, looking for retreats, and yeah. And so I'm really enjoying how that game feels so far.
And I see my Dark Souls experience stops at Dark Souls 1. I haven't played 2 and I didn't play Bloodborne. But compared to the Dark Souls, like there's very similar, like I said, pacing, I call it cadence. But The Witcher, I think, has a much more graceful, like, approach to it because he's very fluid in combat. And that's the whole character of Geralt. But
yeah, I think there are certain things that are more satisfying in the sense of like it's more rewarding than it is in like a game like Dark Souls, because when you kill a goblin or some shit in The Witcher, there's a chance Geralt will fucking cut his head off, and that's always fun to watch.
And they've added, you've got the updates where they've added a whole bunch more like those.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
and it's fucking great. I would say compared more to something like Bloodborne though, which is a lot faster. I would say The Witcher 3 feels clunkier. Like I feel like Bloodborne they really smoothed that style of game out. But The Witcher 3 still feels good. So it's it's just a matter of personal taste. I liked how Bloodborne played a lot. You had a pistol in that always gave you like kind of a way to time like a huge counter that could mean life or death. The Witcher is more like every battle is more of a chess match, while Bloodborne feels more like kind of a card game where you're waiting for the opportunity to like pull your card and like, all right, this is the opportunity I needed to like blow this game open. That analogy sucked, but whatever. You get the idea.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the disappointments I had with the Witcher combat is you have the crossbow, and through the talents and stuff, they seem like they really want you to use the crossbow, but it's so slow to pull out, and it makes sense. I mean, in real life, a crossbow wouldn't be the most convenient sidearm to just like whip out in the middle of a sword fight.
He's like sheathing his sword and then like pulling the fucking rope with his teeth to fucking pull it back.
He just keeps a clip of bolts down his throat so he can just kind of spit them onto the thing as he's pulling out the. But and I think, and maybe I never really thought of that, but maybe it's coming out after Bloodborne because a lot of people were trying to use the crossbow in combat, and they're like, I don't get it. I can't. It's like, well, that's not you can't. If you're in the middle of a sword fight, the crossbow is almost useless.
Yeah. I think that's something else I think Bloodborne has going for it. Obviously, I can't even talk about that game and call it like fair because I just adore Bloodborne so much. But I think that game's combat lends itself to like your style. How do you want to play Bloodborne? I think Witcher 3, even though I'm enjoying it, it still feels like there's kind of a right way and a wrong way to play it.
Certainly.
While Bloodborne, my style while I played Bloodborne was a lot more deliberate, but I've watched so many people play it now where they're fucking hacking and slashing through everything and, just mashing attack and trying to get through. And I think that's something to that game's credit. Doesn't necessarily mean The Witcher 3 is wrong for doing things its way, but it is a much more, the black and white, like, don't fucking do this because you're going to get fucked up if you do. And I think one of those things is range,
Yeah. The only times that I've actually like really used range have been against like griffins or I forget, not dragons, but
right.
Whatever, wyverns or whatever. I think that's what they are. And then you only really use it when they take off in flight to shoot them back out of the sky so that you can go back at it with your sword. But
Yeah.
I'll be really interested to watch your tweets while you play through that game. One of the wonderful things about Witcher 3, and I've talked about it before, is how cool and diverse and creative the story is, not just the main story. In fact, I think the side quests and the jobs you pick up from the bulletin boards are some of the most interesting parts in that game. And just the different characters and people you come across.
I'm not that far into it, so obviously I'm not that invested, but I'm so much more interested in everything I've already done outside of the main story. Like it's totally like I found a fucking dead body in the river and it had a link to like hidden treasure, and like that's and then it's like, well, fuck Yennefer, I'm gonna go find the hidden treasure. Like
right. And I do remember seeing some people complain about that. They're like, oh, well, that makes no sense to the story. You're in this like giant rush to find Yennefer. And then there's other things that I won't get into then for spoilers, but you're constantly going on these huge, like diverging paths because you want to do a side quest. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make sense in real life, but it's a video game. Most of it doesn't make sense in real life. Like I'm okay with that, that disconnect there.
Yeah,
I'm not okay with it if I'm like making huge divergence off the path for boring shit that I don't want to do. But if you're making me forget about the main quest because I'm having so much fun doing other stuff, it's a game. I'm cool. Just like give me fun shit to do, stuff to kill.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing about that. Even maybe later on, it makes less sense when the urgency gets ramped up. But right now, it doesn't feel that urgent. It feels more like tracking down Yennefer is more of a, and this is just my interpretation, I guess. But it feels more like that's Geralt's fucking pet project. But it's not.
That's the story thread that carries over like through the whole franchise, like since the first Witcher.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's his thing, but he's still like, there's still a fucking role for Witchers in that world. So they like, obviously, if there's a fucking monster along the way, it's kind of like watching like a show. Yeah.
That was weird. You got auto-tuned and frozen for a minute, yeah. It's kind of like watching a show.
God damn it, fucking computer sucks. Yeah, I was saying it's like a show like Cowboy Bebop or something, where it's like there is a plot, like and an overall main story, but the character. Did it fuck up again? It fucked up on my end.
Just for a second. It blinked in your back. I guess I could switch over to my wonderful face here just to kind of cover that part up. But yeah, I mean, and a lot of things do that. And I mean, you can even look at something like Don Quixote as a novel where he's got an overall mission, but he's doing all these weird side stuff. Because that's kind of how life is in general. You set off to do one thing, but other things come up, and Witcher's got to eat too. You need to make money. Even though he wants to find Yennefer, he still's got to do his thing.
Yeah, just shit happens, and in this world, it's like, I wouldn't want a game where you just focused on that plot.
Yeah. Like I said,
fucking terrible.
As much as I love the quest writing and the characters of the side stuff, the main story I haven't been particularly interested in. It's like you do it just to advance your character.
Like the Wild Hunt seems cool. Like I think that's a really interesting kind of villain force. Like I don't know what they are really because we haven't touched on them hardly at all, but it like that, and that's a neat idea to me. Like, and that's an original idea. But But yeah, I look forward to playing more of that. I'm glad I picked it up. I'm glad it finally decided to fucking work.
I'm glad too. If I had read that you got it, tried to play it, and had to send it back, that'd be disappointing.
Yeah. So, I think that's about it for video games for me. I have a lot of shit I still like want to play, and I'm like on the cusp of playing. I played Sound Shapes a little bit. Not much to say about that game. Kind of boring.
Is that one that, because that's been out a while, hasn't it? Did they just like bring it to
Yeah.
PS4 or something? Or
It was a PS Plus freebie for this month.
okay.
So, and it's kind of interesting on one way to play like a music game or a rhythm game where you're not like tapping buttons to a rhythm. Like the rhythm doesn't define how you play. You define the rhythm a little bit by like collecting the items and stuff. But it's also not particularly challenging or interesting, or like it's just engaging enough to like be something you can play while you listen to a podcast. Like
the Njoycast podcast. You know, that's a great podcast to listen.
Like this very podcast.
Yes.
But yeah, that's it for me.
I'm kind of in the same boat where there's like a ton of things I want to play. I did pick up Submerged. I don't know if you saw anything about that because it's. Yeah, I think it came out on PS4 the same day it came out on PC.
Yeah, I've seen your tweets on it, and I saw you link a trailer for it, and I watched that trailer, and you seemed pretty interested in it, and I, for the life of me, can't imagine why. I was not impressed by what I've seen of that game.
It's well, for me, there's a lot of things that you can do to cheat to make me like interested in your game, and one of them is just having like water-based exploration, like in a boat or underwater, or just any kind of like nautical.
Oh, mechanic. You're preaching to the choir there. Yeah, like you know me. Give me a boat and 5 out of 10 automatically.
That's what got me, and then it's going for that kind of Journey or Ico or whatever vibe where it's, you know, it's about story. All the story is told through like a gibberish language, but it close enough that you can. You also find like pictures, and you can infer the story through the pictures that you find. And the game is 100% explore this this sunken world and find these. There's supply crates which you need for the story. You know, finding those advance the story, but there's way more like just discoverables that tell the backstory of the world. And like I said, they're all through pictures. There's no spoken word. And it's kind of neat. I'm not like it looked really cool. I was really excited for it to come out, and it came out, and I've been playing it, and I don't dislike it, but it's not anything to, you know, it's not game of the year, drop everything. I'm not going to sit here today on the podcast. It's like, oh, go play it. You need to buy it.
Right.
It's not bad. And I want to say it was like $12 or $13, which is a weird, what it is all these games that are going to the $15 price point, at least on Steam, when they first launch, are on like a 10% discount. So you end up paying, you know, just under $15. And I don't have any problems with it for that price point. But my biggest disappointment with it is a game like that. The thing I love about those kind of worlds is just exploring the worlds and finding like landmarks and just really cool architecture, or, you know, something that sets the world apart from any other, you know, game or place that you've gotten to explore. And while there's some really, really cool moments on things that you find, a lot of that world is just very repetitive. All the buildings use basically the same texture. It's all the green, like ivy and concrete block. And so you're seeing a lot of the same stuff over and over again.
That's kind of what I've seen of the game. That's kind of why I wasn't impressed with it. Like the trailers they put out and stuff, because it's like it all looked, despite the water looking all right, it all looked very samey, from the
Right.
environments to what you do in those environments, where it's
Oh,
like
what you do
you're
is the exact same thing. You're just climbing, and
right.
I'll give them that the climbing, and it's almost like Assassin's Creed-esque in that there'll be just these different ledges and footholds, and you have to push in the direction of these to move that way. They did take out the free run. You're not like holding a button down to do it because nothing is urgent. There's no, at least to the point that I am, and I think I've only got like 3 supply crates left to have all those, and I assume that that'll be the end of the game, or at least the end of the story. There's not been any like urgency to anything because there's nothing that can hurt you. You can't fall off of stuff. Um, you can't like misclimb. You're not going to have a ledge fall out from underneath you and kill you. There's no monsters to run away from. It's all about exploration, which is perfectly fine for me, because it's a really great, relaxing game to play if you want to just come home and like unwind from work. But if you're going to do that, the world that you explore needs to be varied enough to make you want to explore it. Like
Yeah.
right now, it's just like, oh, here's another building. When you come across the landmarks, and there's only a handful of those, like I say, they're really cool. One was like this big, dilapidated crane, and I was climbed it up it, and it was not really even a puzzle. It's just here's a really long ladder, but you get to the top and you get this gorgeous view, and it has some really cinematic camera angles. And it was really cool when you're up on top of the crane that just they did a real good job incorporating the sound to have that kind of creaking, ominous, even though I knew I couldn't possibly get hurt. You were uneasy because you're so high up with the creaking and the whatever. But aside from those moments, it's just here's an ivy covered wall. I'm climbing some ledges.
I think that's actually it would be more interesting to me if there was an actual kind of threat of death, and not like a threat of death in like, oh, a game over, fuck, I gotta respawn type thing. But it's something I thought Journey did really well, where like there's a game where there's no like action, like you don't kill anything. There is action, but you're not fighting and shit. There's not combat. Um, and then like you spend the whole game, and because it's just this sort of like A to B adventure, you don't think like your little masked character is ever in any real threat. And then, well, spoiler to everyone who hasn't played Journey, watch out. Sorry, I'm gonna spoil it. You get to that point in the game where your character's going up the snowy mountain, and she's just getting slower and slower, and she's starting. I'm assuming it's a girl. I've been told that, so we'll go with that. So the character's just moving slower and slower, and then they die.
Yeah.
Like and then you're
what's,
like,
what's really
fuck.
cool to me is almost right before, not like an instant before that, but as you're nearing the slow, laborious end, you like go through basically a graveyard with all those other markers that like that's one thing with Journey is it's open to interpretation. It means something different to everybody that plays it. But as it's dawned on you that you're struggling and you've never been under any real threat, there's like that sand dragon thing that took away your scarf's length and stuff, but nothing that you ever felt like was going to kill you. And then you realize, oh shit, I'm going to die. And I think that like cemetery-esque scene, I forget exactly how it's presented, but it basically like the markers of all these other people that have made this journey and came to the same fate. And it just like kind of dawns on you that, oh, well, that's not what I thought was going to happen.
And I thought that was a really good use of death, not as a mechanic like other games do, but keeping death around as
a part of the world.
Yeah, as a storytelling tool. And I think that there needs to be that on some level for video games. Like, not necessarily, like I said, that fear of like, oh, I fell into a pit, I got to restart. But there should be an element of
a reminder that your characters are mortal, that they're not. And to be fair, Submerged is doing that. I really think that they're drawing a lot off of Journey in that respect. And some other games, the reason you're looking for the supply crates is because you assume brother, I mean, just from what you've gathered, is dying from a wound, and you're trying to find medicine and whatnot to keep him from dying. So there is that like specter of death there, but that's more on a motivational level. It almost becomes a game objective, not like a world element. And there's something interesting going on with your character herself that I'll kind of. Well, I don't know exactly where they're going with it, for one, because I'm still in the middle of it, but I don't really want to get too specific about it in case people want to play the game. That one being new, not like Journey that's been out for 4 years, but so it's like they're trying to do it, but they don't pull it off as eloquently as Journey did. And that's not a like, oh, I'm knocking 3 points off of it because it didn't do what Journey did, because that's like trying to hold every band that ever comes out up to like, I don't want to pick a band name because I'll pick like the most embarrassing like model singer. But my point is, you can't compare everything to the best things, like how everybody, I guess Citizen Kane on the movies would be how everybody's like, oh, it's the Citizen Kane of this or that. It's like, well, you don't always have to, when I go watch Jurassic World, I'm not expecting it to be the next Oscar winning drama.
You're not?
No. And when I'm playing a small indie title, although Journey was an indie title as well, but from a more established indie. And they had the backing of Sony, so that's where you get whatever. But anyway, so I'm not going to hold Submerged up like, oh, this better resonate as much as Journey did. But it's a fair comparison to start to draw, because they're doing a lot of the same
I
things.
think it's just it came to mind when you're talking about that crane thing, and it's like, how safe do you actually feel? Like, and I'm not saying
if they would recreate that feeling in Submerged more often, because that was one of the coolest moments, because it did exactly what you're saying. It brought a gravity to the world that it didn't have up until that point.
Right.
So that's what I've been.
Yeah. Well,
I did download Beyond Eyes, because that came out for PlayStation last week, and then it hit yesterday for Steam. And that's another one that I've been really interested in. I can't wait to play it, but I haven't had a chance to yet.
Well, other than that, I've been playing a lot of board games lately.
I saw that, and I forgot, but I assumed on this morning when I was reading through Twitter and just throughout the week, because you've talked about like 4 different ones. I was like, Ben's going to talk about board games, and I forgot.
Yes, I am. That Letters from Whitechapel game I showed off 2 weeks ago on the show. The Jack the Ripper board game is amazing. It is so much fun.
Now that one can be played single, like by yourself, can't it?
It has to be at least two people, because somebody has to be Jack the Ripper and somebody has to be controlling the police. And no matter how many people you have on the police, you control all 5 police pawns. And the whole game board is just it's just the streets of Whitechapel with little points on it that Jack the Ripper is writing down where he's moving to, and then you're moving your pieces and trying to like find clues and capture him and stuff. And there's not a game I've ever played where like the task seemed so impossible, and it feels impossible on both ends, according to my brother, who he was the only one who felt like playing like Jack the Ripper when we played. But it seems impossible for him to commit the murders and escape because there's so many cops, and it feels impossible to be the cops and catch him because there's so many spots he could go.
But that sounds like very good balance, if you ask me. Like,
yeah, and it absolutely is. And we played 3 times, and we caught him 3 times. And we were cheering when we would catch him, because like the best you can do like the first night is he'll kill somebody, and then it's like he's trying to get back to his hideout, and if he gets back to his hideout, you go to the next night, and if he does that 4 times, he wins. And so the best you can kind of do is get an idea of where he might be going. And what was really fucking funny was he would have won the second game if he had not misunderstood the rules. On the third night, Jack the Ripper has to kill 2 women. And so he fucking... And so he kills 2 women, and those spots are mapped out on the board. And then he's like, we don't know which one he's coming from, which one was the second murder. But he committed the murders, both murders, right next to cops. So he's at one of those spots. And so we're just like, oh, it's our turn. So we check both of those dead bodies, which you're standing over, and you're busted. Fuck you. It's a hard game to really explain.
The number one rule of serial killing is do not do it in front of a cop.
Yeah, he literally like murdered a woman like right in front of the police, and yeah, I wonder how ever he got away with it.
I give him props. The cops are out specifically looking for him, and he still managed to successfully murder her before. Yeah.
Yeah, he murdered 4 out of 5. That's still 80%.
Now I'm like creating this backstory in my head where he was standing there, and there was a woman and a cop, and he shouted to the cop, "Look over there!" and then murdered the woman, and so he got away with it until the cop turned around.
That's the thing is like these funny, and it's horrible because it's based off horrible murders, but it's still funny because it's like you're creating Jack the bumbling fucking Ripper, and you're just coming up with all these like hilarious scenarios of like every time we would try to play, like one player would be like the detective cop. So, and he would always be out. He's specifically labeled the detective, and he's on the other end of the fucking map, away from the murders and stuff, and it's like he's lost in the middle of fucking London while everyone else is trying to capture the fucking killer, and he's like, oh, do I turn here? I don't know where to go. So that game it's kind of hard to explain, but it is probably the best board game I've played, and I've been playing a lot of them these days, so I'm not saying something. We played another one last night that I tweeted about, and it's called Tales of the Arabian Nights, and you pick your character and stuff, and you have characters like Aladdin and Sinbad and a bunch of other shit, and you get, and it's kind of close to D&D. Like you get this huge book of just like story quests things, and like so on your turn you get an encounter, and then you have to flip through this book, and there's all this like funny flavor text of shit going on. So like my game started, and like 3 turns in I went to jail because I tried to rob somebody, and you every encounter you just have this list of shit you can do, and it's like, oh, an evil vizier who's going to destroy the world, I'm gonna rob him, and you just pick like the funniest shit that you can think of. And so I ended up going to jail for that. And this game is good, but it's really fucked up. I did not get out of jail for an hour. Like, just everybody else got turns, and my turns would be reduced to I would talk to the guard, and they would not let me out. And it would be shit like, okay, this time I'm going to attack the guard. And one time it was such bullshit. I attacked the guard, I beat him up, and the guard ran away. And you would think that means I won, but he went through a trap door and like disappeared, and I was still in fucking prison. So it would be shit like that kept happening. And then I got out of jail, and I was like, I was already screwed. There was no way I could win. I had been in jail too long. And then so I get out of jail, and then I run into a blind man, and I try to like pray away his blindness, and it works. And like Allah heard me and like fucking bestowed sight on this poor blind man. And the fucking blind man stole my clothes. Like, and that's in the game. And in the text, they wrote it down. The fucking blind dude stole my clothes. And then I like wished for Allah to blind him again, and he does. and that was pretty funny. And then I immediately went back to jail after that. So like that game is fucked up, but it's hilarious. So, Letters from Whitechapel, Tales of the Arabian
I'm
Nights.
going
If
to
you're
try
at all
something
into
here. Let's
board
see if this
games,
works. I don't know what it's actually doing, if it's doing anything.
you're
But
trying to put shit on me.
yeah, well, I was trying to throw up a link at least to Whitechapel, but I don't know how this actually works. We don't know what we're doing on this show.
I would do it if I didn't think my computer would blow up trying.
Well, see, it was funny because we did our first live show 2 weeks ago, and then last week you mentioned we I don't know about Derek because we don't care about him, but you had a bunch of stuff going on, and I know I had a ton of stuff going on as well. And so we just skipped it. But I was like, well, we're still trying to figure out this whole like Google Hangouts live show thing. That gives me some time to make cool graphics to overlay and figure out how this works. And I didn't look at it fucking once. Literally like a half hour before we were going to start today, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do all that stuff.
Yeah, I honestly, I didn't forget. I always know I have the show on Wednesdays, but I didn't. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind until I like looked at the clock and I was like, "Oh shit, 2:50. I better stop playing The Witcher and get on the fucking thing." But that's what streams are for.
Yeah. So, Letters from Whitechapel and Arabian Nights.
Tales of the Arabian Nights.
See, I may have to look into these. One of the things, what I've been busy with. I forgot I had myself up on the screen here, and I'm looking all around like an idiot. My parents are moving. They're selling the house that I grew up in, and everybody's like, "Oh, are you sad?" No, I haven't lived there in 10 years. But they have a big house with a lot of stuff, and they're moving into a condo. So we've been helping them, pack and move stuff and get ready to sell stuff. But they also have things that we're getting because they don't need. Like they have a real nice big, like, table, like it's in their kitchen. It'll be our dining room table. But I live in a really teeny tiny fucking house. Like basically what you see behind me here is my house. So we had to like completely like go through and get rid of a bunch of stuff to make room and rearrange all of our furniture and do that kind of stuff. But I'll be getting a nice big table that we didn't have before, and board games are kind of one of the things that will let us do. Because a lot of them tend to be hard to do when you have no large flat surfaces in your house.
Yeah, like people take board games and they always think of like Monopoly and shit, and like Monopoly sucks.
Yeah,
like, especially.
I don't have friends. Say it like that. No, I've got a lot of friends. I tend to have people over a lot though, partly because of how small our house is. So when we play games, they tend to be like just me and my wife. So things like Monopoly, as bad as that is 1,000 times worse with two people. But there's a lot of really cool games that you can do with two people.
I have a ton of them.
I was trying to look, and it looked like Fantasy Flight. Is that who's behind the Letters from Whitechapel?
I'm not sure. I tend not to look at things by like publisher, really, like because I mean Fantasy Flight. They if it's not from them, they've made a few that we own that are pretty good.
Yeah, and that's who I think I've got a couple from them, and there's one I think it's just called Treasure Island, and we really like that one. There's another one, or maybe it's Deserted Island or something like that. I think it's Treasure Island, and there's a similar one. It looks like almost the same game, just like slightly different rules. Set in a desert instead of in the ocean, but they can be played. And what's cool to me about those is that they're co-op board games. So instead of like having me against my wife and then us getting mad at each other for like winning or whatever, you're actually working together towards a goal. So those are cool.
Right.
And then I've got some interest. Most of the games I have now that aren't like Monopoly or Sorry or whatever are card based, like deck based games, because again, we did not have space for anything with a big board, but we will.
Yeah. Yeah, Letters from Whitechapel and Tales of the Arabian Nights have huge boards, um, and that's almost
I'm gonna make her get into
that's
like
fun.
the Warhammer 40K like tabletop miniatures. We'll
We're
get
gonna
this
play
nice big
fucking War
table that we
Machine,
won't get
damn it!
to use because the whole fucking thing will be covered in little minifigs.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that
yeah,
was kind of the thing though. Is like I had to like it's really hard to get people to come over because for like things like board games, and I invited my friends over for my brother's birthday, saying like we got some of these, let's play them, and we've played board games before. Normally we're drinking while we do it, um but
yeah,
I
I
was
kind of
like, I
thought that
want to
was
try.
like required, but
Yeah, and I think for Tales of the Arabian Nights it's pretty necessary for all the bad shit that's going to happen to you. Seriously, the entire time I played that game, the only thing I could consider a positive was I ran into a genie, and the genie like didn't get upset when my prayers failed to help him. Like that was the nicest thing that happened to me in Tales of the Arabian Nights. Everything else fucked me over. Um,
that one looks
but
like it
like,
can be. It's 2 to 6 players. It's listed at, so I might have to check it out
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Is
I
it
kind
one?
of want to play it tonight.
We're gonna have to switch to like the video game and board game podcast. One of the things I'm always curious about because we talked about this. I can't remember if it was on the show, the last show we did, or if it was just me and you talking. But board games, it's always funny because a lot of times we'll get in the mood to like go out and buy a new one. And then you get out and you realize like, oh, well, this one looks cool, but it's 50 or $60. And for
Yeah,
some reason that seems really expensive. I mean, it's not say for some reason it's because I don't have a lot of money, but it's one of those things that I always have to like remind myself like, man, that's expensive for a board game. It's like, yeah, but this is like a physical good with actual parts and stuff. And I pay that much
yeah,
for video game. Now, I guess I shouldn't say it like that because that's making it sound like, and I'm paying for a video game and there's nothing physical to it. Well, there's an ass load of labor behind a video game as well, probably a lot more.
well, I think
But
it's a matter of like valuing your time, and it's like, and at first, because and that's what I mean. Is like you always think board games, you think Monopoly and shit, and all this dumb fucking crap that just sits in your closet.
that's probably true.
Where
There's way more times where you buy a board game and play it like once and then it sits in your closet because you just don't.
like you don't think like, what if we made this a regular thing? Because this game is actually fucking fun,
Right.
And you wouldn't say that if you bought like a video game, like poor example, but I can't think of anything like multiplayer, like, let's buy Madden because we're going to play Madden all the time or something. If like people have that relationship, then they'll enjoy that. Board games are the same way. You just have to find the board games that fit your circles.
Right.
And
One of the things that always scares me off is I don't know a lot about them because I don't, follow board game circles. And there's a lot of times where there's games that they'll be listed like, oh, 2 to 6 players. You're like, sweet, we can play this 2 player. Then you get it, and it's like, yeah, it technically can be played with 2 players, but it completely fucking
right.
sucks. Like, I wish
I think
distinction.
I think Letters of Whitechapel is one of those. Like, I think you really need to have at least 3 people playing as the cops to really enjoy it.
So 4 total.
Yeah, so like, and that's part of the fun is like everybody kind of bickering and like trying to figure out what to do together. It's a cooperative experience,
and it makes that more. Now, you had mentioned that there's always 5 cops that are controlled, no matter how many people are playing as a cop. Now, if you have say 3 people playing as the cops, do you each control all 5 on your turn, or do you like divvy up who's who? How does that work?
You kind of divvy it up because there is a turn order. Like all the cops go on the same turn, but it's like one cop character, one guy goes, and he might be controlling 2 cops, and then it's like it's going clockwise or counterclockwise or whatever. So there is a turn order, but you divvy it up, and so like what we would do would be like, okay, who wants to control 2 cops, and who wants to control this guy, and whatever. But you're always talking. You're always talking about like, where do you want your guys to go, and like, well, should I do this? No, don't do that because he's gonna flank you around here or whatever and get back to his hideout. And it's like, no, he won't. You fucking idiot. And he's over here.
Now, by the rules, like, do you have to do it that way, or can you play like me and you are both cops against whoever's the Ripper, and say you move one of the cop characters? Can I move that same character on my turn if I, or
after the characters moved, like
they
characters
can?
moved, and
Okay.
that's the turn. That's why it's so important to communicate and be
Well,
like,
and
all
that's what
right,
makes
should
it
I do
sound even
this?
more fun to me when you mention like, oh yeah, it's really more fun if you have at least 3 people playing the cops, because now you're starting to sound like a real life police force where everybody like you're ostensibly working together, but you're like not agreeing on what you should do, and you turn into this like arguing, bumbling like force.
Yeah, that's totally what happens is because like everybody's trying to solve it because we all want to win, but we all have different ideas of like what solving it means.
Yeah.
Because like the final round we played, I had some completely irrational suspicion that the hideout was on space 139. So for literally the entire second night, I would not move I was in control of 2 cops. I would not move one of them away from 139. I kept it blocked off. And and that's how we won because like his hideout wasn't on 139, but he needed to get through 139 to get back to his hideout. So I had him blocked off preemptively.
And that's where Poker Face has to come in, because was that when where your brother was playing the Ripper?
Yeah, all three my brother played, and he fucking did not sell shit. And that was
I could just
scary.
see me. I'm terrible at Poker Face, and in a situation like that, I'm great. I don't want to say great, but I'm good at poker. But in a situation like that where I know I need to get through that spot, and I know I'm kind of boned right now because you have it blocked off, but you and like your teammates are kind of bickering about whether you should move or you shouldn't, I would have such a hard time like not reacting to that. Like,
yeah. Well, I like he would react to stuff, but like it's kind of that like just sort of. My brother's a fucking scary person. He took to that role like a fucking fish to water. Hint hint FBI. But he like the other way he can lose is not if you catch him. You can directly, if you think you know what space he's on, you can say, okay, I'm arresting, I'm making an arrest on this space, and if he's there, you win. But another way he can lose is he has 15 moves to get back to his hideout after a murder. And he has a lot of ways he can move around. He can cut through alleys. He can take a carriage and shit and move double spaces and stuff. So he has plenty of time to do it. But we blocked him off completely for 15 turns. And he did not sell it up until the 15th turn where he's like, yeah, you won. And that was fucking, and that was, because we were all stressing out where it was like, well, fuck, he's either going to be in his hideout the next turn or we beat him. And he hasn't said shit. And not like me. I would have been so fucking angry that I couldn't get back to my hideout. But he wouldn't sell it until we had won. And it was another one of those moments.
How this even works, because obviously he can't have like an actual physical piece he moves around the board, or otherwise you'd know exactly where he's at.
Right.
Does
he has a little screen.
So he like kind of just keeps track on like a piece of paper or something, like what?
Yeah, they give you a little. Jack the Ripper has like it's kind of like Yahtzee. You have this pad of like a chart, and he writes down the number of every space he's moving, and he lets you know if he used a carriage or he went through an alley. But what keeps him honest is the first thing he writes down is the space that his hideout is. And he gets to pick that. It can be any number he wants. And then like he has to write down every number. If you have a real dick who might erase it or something, then yeah, then that friend's an asshole. He ruined the game.
Well, I would hope that you'd notice him sitting over there like furiously erasing his.
Yeah, like me, like, with like clenched teeth, like fucking.
No, haha.
Nope. All right, I'm making an arrest on 55. Shit. I mean, no, I'm not there. But yeah, and that's a game that's $60, and I felt really kind of like that's a lot of money for a board game, and I I was so relieved when everybody had a good time, because it's like that would have been $60 that would have sat in my closet
Yeah,
forever if
yeah.
nobody did. But it fucking that game's outstanding. So yeah. So Tales of the Arabian Nights, great if you have alcohol around. Letters from Whitechapel, just great. Period. Yeah, there's plenty of other board games I could recommend, but those are the recent ones I've played that really surprised me.
You know what's interesting to me, and this gets a little off topic, but Kickstarter. We've talked a lot about it, about how where it falls for video games, but it's a platform. It's funny. My wife always catches me off guard because she'll be like, "Oh, look at this new product," and it'll be a Kickstarter because obviously Kickstarter is used for pretty much any good. I think it has to be a physical good, but board games have, I think, really benefited from Kickstarter. They're probably more so than video. And video games have more high-profile successes, but there's been some really cool board games. Now, board games also tend to be one of the categories in Kickstarter that lead to that. Oh, we got funded. We took people's money. Yeah, this will come out eventually, and then they just kind of languish forever.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, if you've not dealt with it before, very, very much underestimate the cost and process involved with manufacturing a physical product.
I think people like fucking underestimate the cost, period. Like in everything they fucking make on Kickstarter, it always feels like, oh, that's not enough money. How the fuck do you like? That was the big thing with like Mighty Number 9, and I don't remember if we talked about it on the show, but
I think that stuff was all kind of coming down about the same time we recorded our last show, and that
how the fuck is that not coming out this year? Like,
well,
and how are you going to make it better?
To me is how they kind of hid that they were going to delay it until after the Kickstarter for
Red Ash.
Yeah, Red Ash. And Red Ash, what I thought happened with that one was a lot grosser than what actually happened. It was nearing the end of its Kickstarter time period, and it had become very clear that it was not going to hit its goal.
Right.
Then they announced that they had teamed up with a Chinese developer to fund the game, so it was going to get made. And I thought they were counting that money as Kickstarter money, like they had the developer put the money in Kickstarter so that it get funded. And I think that's kind of sleazy because then it locks in. I mean, you can always physically go in and cancel out your pre-order, or not pre-order, your pledge. But it basically locks in all that. But that's not what they did. They just said, oh, by the way, we don't actually need the Kickstarter money that we said we needed to make this. We're going to make it anyway. Now we're going to take the money that we got from you and put it towards stretch goals. Like the whole campaign will just be like for stretch goals. And that's not ideal, because if I'm the one pledging to this campaign and then suddenly at the 11th hour you change what the campaign is, that's certainly not something I want to see happen.
Right.
But on the same token, if I'm a fan that's pledging because I want to see the game, and the worst news you're going to give me is, hey, this game is definitely going to get made, regardless if we get other people's funding, you're not cheating me out of anything at that point, because I'm going to get the game that I was trying to get in the first place.
Sure.
So I didn't think it was gross. It was weird. And then what ended up ultimately happening is the Kickstarter did fail. So even if you had pledged, and even if they had switched what your pledge was for out from underneath you, nobody actually got any money taken out of their pocket, because when it fails, they don't take your money. So
I think what was so shitty about that was there was something like you said, putting the Mighty Number 9 thing, hiding that in that curtain of Red Ash fucking funding stuff.
Yeah, and that's because it was very clear that they knew they were going to have to delay it during the Red Ash Kickstarter, and it was very clear that they were worried that if they announced that it would hurt the Red Ash Kickstarter, so they just held back on that new. Now at the same time, that seems sleazy, but isn't it just business? I mean, I don't know. It just shows that they're not very forthcoming with their with their
Yeah,
fans.
I mean, I guess, you're right. It isn't unheard of in this business world, but
It's
it's also kind of like it's the last type of thing
it's
concept
questionable,
should be trying to do
right?
because they're a young business. And it's like this isn't like Capcom pulling a shitty move. It's like if the
Not
like
that that makes it
Inafune,
any better for Capcom to do it, but yeah,
but they're like established. So it's like if Capcom does a shitty thing, we're still like, okay, well, I want to play fucking Resident Evil or I want to play Devil May Cry, so I'll put up with it on some level. Concept doesn't have that. Like all they really had was like Inafune's goodwill, and
and
they
they
shat
completely
that
trash
away.
that. Right.
Yeah, and it was like now we don't have any goodwill towards this guy. Um, and we're just sort of like everything about Mighty Number Nine feels like a disaster to me,
Yeah,
which is a
well,
shame because I love fucking Mega Man and I want a Mega Man
and
like
maybe
game.
you can give me your perspective on this because I'm not a big Mega Man fan. I'm not even a small Mega Man fan. I don't hate the games, but I just never whatever.
Sure.
But from what I could see when they announced Mighty Number Nine at the very first announcement, it's like, oh, that's cool because that's basically Mega Man. You know, that's how they can do it if Capcom's not going to actually give us Mega Man. And then the more I would see about Mighty Number Nine, and then the same with Red Ash, I'm thinking if I was a Mega Man fan, I'm not sure that either of these things really appeal to me that much. Like
Well,
all they
Mighty
really
Number,
have is like hand cannon and Inafune, so that's in common.
yeah.
But it seemed to be missing a lot of the what made Mega
Well,
Man Mega Man.
well, here's kind of the arc I think a lot of people felt when Mighty Number Nine first got announced. It got announced. Inafune's behind it. You know, it's a Mega Man spiritual successor, and Capcom's not doing anything with Mega Man, so we're all like, everybody's like, yeah, all right. And then I think the more knowledgeable, like people started to come out and be like, look, Inafune is not the creative backbone of Mega Man. Like he gets the credit for being the creator or whatever, but those games were good. Like I think one person put it pretty well, where it's like Inafune is a great businessman, and he got a lot of mileage out of Mega Man, but he's not the reason you like those games. Like he's not the designer so much as he is like the sort of you know more business end force to that series. So it's like, well, he's behind it, so and more we started to see like instead of like the cool artist rendering of like a screenshot of how that game might look, instead of anything in that cool art style, we got this kind of shoddy looking like 3D sort of visual, like fucking ugly ass game that never really looked better in every trailer they showed for it. And now it's gotten to the point where this year I started so excited for the game, and now I'm like, I'm completely like, this is gonna suck. And on some level, it's kind of like any other game. I would be like, oh, you're pushing it back, good, because it looks terrible. But this one looks so fundamentally bad that I'm just like, how are you going to make this better by next year when you plan to release it? Like, what
Right.
could you possibly do if you didn't get it right the first time? Like,
Unless they're giving it a complete. I just pulled it up because I really haven't been following it that closely because I don't care about the game. I'm not sitting here like I can't wait to play that. And I probably will never play it. Um, but I just pulled up a screenshot. It looks like a mobile phone game. Like these visuals are terrible.
a little bit. It honestly looks like before Inafune left Capcom, they were working on a Mega Man game called Mega Man Universe. Um, I don't know how many people remember that. It was kind of, in a lot of ways, it was a little ahead of its time in that it kind of looked like it was like the Mario Maker for Mega Man, whereas like you're designing these levels and you have all these tools and stuff, and you can play as like Ryu and shit, and like you can like fucking play as like the Mega Man from like the cover of the first Mega Man in America, like that goofy looking bitch. Um, and it looked awful. Like it kind of seemed like an interesting idea, but the game looked absolutely terrible to play. Mega Man looked kind of weird and lanky and kind of like how Mighty Number Nine looks. And it did not look fun at all. And it looks like they continued more off that than like what made Mega Man good, which seems so weird to me because it's like Mega Man 9 and 10 are fucking good games, and they just stuck with what made the series work. And instead, like for this spiritual successor, rather than go pixelated with it or go with a unique art style, they're just kind of going with like what they know, which is 3D rendering of dumb shit.
Yeah, and like so me looking at it from my perspective, it's not even particularly good 3D rendering, and I think that would be disappointing if I was looking forward to the game because the like you said, the artist rendering, the concept like art that they provided gave you the impression that they were going to go with that real cool like anime-esque hand drawn, which you can we have got the technology to do now with HD. You know, Ubisoft pulls it off all the time. There are a lot of other games too. And I thought, man, that looks really gorgeous. And then now we're getting, like I said, to me, it looks like a Game Loft mobile game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was probably the first disappointment. And then just more and more I saw the gameplay, it's like they're putting everything they have into like this dash mechanic. And it's like, that's a mechanic you did in like Mega Man X. It's like that's not a new thing. All you've done is made it so like that means you collect people or whatever enemies, and you get health back or something. And it's like I'm sure it will be different enough to say like, oh, it's not just a Mega Man clone. But I think it will also be different enough to say like, God, I wish this was a Mega Man clone,
Right?
because that's what they sold it as. Like they sold it to fill this niche that a lot of people wanted, and it all looks like this half-assed attempt at it. And it makes me really nervous for that what is it, Bloodstained?
Yeah, the like Castlevania style.
Yeah, and that's coming from fucking Concept too. And it's
I didn't realize that was so they're like working on 3 projects that they've put out 0.
Yeah, well, I think they all have different teams. I think Concept is supposed to be more of a company thing. And to their credit, they got the Symphony of the Night guy working on that. And he's actually, he is a creator type. I wouldn't say he's more of a businessman like I would say Inafune is. But that game's selling itself the same way Mighty Number 9 did, where it's like, hey, here's the guy behind that game you loved, and then here's a cool fucking drawing of what the game could look like, and then it's like, well, what will the game actually look like? Well, it might look like shit.
Yeah, and that's what it had me on the Red Ash, and that's probably why it didn't meet its funding goals, because people have wised up after the Mighty Number 9 stuff, because they didn't show crap. They were like, here's this comic book style art of the story we want to tell. Fund us.
Funny, I think like the anime for it got funded though.
Yeah.
And that's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, how many projects can you have? Like, make Mighty Number 9 as good as possible, and then like, if that game is awesome and people feel justified in like kickstarting it with you, you are like rock solid going forward on your next projects. Like, this seems like flailing.
There was one announced today that I'm kind of divided on. And I haven't looked at the Kickstarter, so I could be falling into the same trap I did with Shadowrun. But Divinity Original Sin 2 was announced that it's going to be hitting Kickstarter. They said when, but I don't know the date. It's going to have a playable prototype at PAX Prime, and I know I haven't talked about it much on the show, but I that's a game that I did play a little bit of and never got through because it's a Baldur's Gate style, real long point and click RPG, but it's a very, very good one.
Right.
So announcing an Original Sin 2 is very exciting. At the same time, there's something to me, and it's not right or wrong. They'll probably kill it with the Kickstarter based on the popularity of the first one. And the first one was funded through Kickstarter as well. But it just seems almost exploitative of your fans to be like, oh, we've got this game we want to make. It's this original idea. We'd love it if you guys could, help us make it. And you do, and it becomes a massive success. Divinity did very, very well, both critically and I think sales-wise. And then they'd be like, wow, you guys loved our game. Buy us another one. Like, I almost feel like when the game was that popular with the first one, that it just feels like you're taking advantage to go back to the fans to fund a second one. But
I have less of a problem with that. Probably because
I'm very
at a
willing
point
to
now.
concede that it's probably an irrational feeling that I have. It's just, and it's not like to the point where I'm like taking to Twitter like "fuck you," no boycott. I'm not.
Well, I think suspicion is always kind of called for anytime anybody says, "Hey, give me your money." Because that's no matter how good intention, that's what it is. It's hey, let me have your money, and it's like, well.
By the way, the Njoycast Patreon will be kicking off next week.
Let us have your money.
Not really. We don't plan on doing that anytime soon.
I do. I absolutely want your money. I want to quit my job.
So. This is one of those long tail cons. That's why we got your crappy like laptop and webcam quality. Yeah. We're hoping that this drives people nuts to the point that they're like, fuck it, take our money, just get a better computer.
Yeah, I wish I could get like the freak out pity buck. That's a good market. But like I don't have a problem with that, I guess, because I'm always constantly trying to look for people to me that's almost like I want Kickstarter to be that, where they get money for their project works, so you develop this like reliable financial relationship with your fans, so you have a business. Like if you can make Kickstarter a business model, I think that only becomes successful if you're good at it. So, like, if you're good at, like, rewarding your backers' faith. So, like, if you're, like...
You can probably hear that somebody's knocking on my door, but I'm not going to answer it.
Oh, no, please, let them on the show. But, yeah, I think, like, yeah, now that knock, like, I'm worried, like, it's going to get, like...
It'll get louder and louder. I'm watching the window. They haven't gone away yet, so...
Of course not.
They can probably hear us talking, but
yeah, well, you don't. Why do people do that? Like, just because you can hear people doesn't mean they're coming to the door,
right?
Like, walk away. But I mean, like,
oh, there they go. Sucker. I think it's my neighbor. I'll run over and say hi afterwards. Not that any of you care about that.
But yeah, I think I want Kickstarter to be for something like Divinity, where it's like. I have no problem with a like Kickstarter as a business model instead of just a one-shot project thing, because honestly, sometimes publisher relationships fucking suck. So, is it this fucking fuzz?
No.
We should probably wrap up the show. Well.
But then I have to go see who it was.
Yeah, you do.
I don't like talking to people. That's weird.
Well, good job. You just talked to somebody for 2 hours. And you can talk to us, both of us, on Twitter. You can find Steve at Phaser3D and me at BP Matlock. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, you do. You have it on the thing. And you can find the official feed for Njoystick.com at Njoystick. Stuff goes up, stuff goes down. Stuff goes left, stuff goes right. I don't know what the fuck we do at Njoystick, but we have people writing there occasionally, and we have this show going up there all the time. Fuck. Can we end this? I'm flailing, Steve. Give me material. Come on.
No, but it's funny because
give me a life run.
If I try to just antagonize you by letting it draw out like that, I've got me on cam right now because that's got the stuff at the bottom, so it doesn't work, because then it, not only are you like stammering for an ending, I'm just sitting here like
Well, normally I would have something funny to say. I thought I was getting pretty good at it, but now I'm just sweating. So I need to get I really need to get the fuck out of this room or I'm gonna
Yeah,
die.
I'm eager to turn my air conditioning and fan back on. So join
All
us
right.
next week, maybe, or the week after, or never.
Oh, I should be. I can look at my schedule right now. No, I can't do it next week. Maybe
Oh,
Thursday.
I can't do it next week anyway either. Thursday maybe, but
Thursday maybe.
yeah.
I work 7 to 4, so that's right
Whatever.
in our recording time.
We may be back. We may not be.
Follow the fucking Twitter feed that I just gave you, assholes. If you want to fucking know when the show's going.